Welcome to today's seminar, 40 Years of Peace Negotiations in the Service of the World Community. In this seminar, we'll delve into the extensive experiences spanning over 4 decades in diplomacy and political affairs for our esteemed professor and the renowned UN diplomat, Staffan de Mistura. So first, we would like to give a warm welcome to Professor de Mistura. Professor Mistura expresses deep affection for his dual heritage, embracing his father's Italian roots and his mother's Swedish origins. So in tribute to Professor Mistura's rich heritage, the seminar is jointly organized by the Sciences Po Nordique Association, French Nordic Circle, and Italian Association La Strada. And today's seminar will be moderated by me, Oscar Brunsell, and Alice Lastrella. And together we'll guide the interview with Staffan de Mistura, followed by Q&A, where you, the audience, can pose your questions directly to Professor de Mistura. And as previously stated, Staffan de Mistura has an extensive career which spans over 4 decades, during which he has amassed invaluable experience in diplomacy and political affairs. And de Mistura's tenure has brought into some of the world's worst war zones, providing aid to individuals facing severe adversities. With Envoy roles to 19 nations and a cumulative total of 22 missions in conflict zones throughout his over 40-year tenure, his service stands as a testament to his dedication and resilience. And this guarantees you compelling narratives, brimming with valuable insights gleaned from a lifetime dedicated to resolving wars and conflicts. And among Professor de Mistura's many assignments, I would like to highlight 4, which with exceptional importance. You have 2007-2009 Special Representative of the Secretary General in Iraq, 2010-2011 Special Representative of the Secretary General in Afghanistan, 2011-2013 Under Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, and thereafter Deputy Foreign Minister in Mario Monti's government in Italy. And then from July 2014 to December 2018, Staffan de Mistura was Special Envoy for Syria to the United Nations Secretary General. It should also be noted that since September 2021, Staffan de Mistura serves as Special Envoy for Western Sahara in the United Nations Secretary General. And then very lastly, in 2022, Staffan de Mistura released his book On Twisting with the Devil. And the book provides insights into the horrors occurring around the world, where Professor Mistura gives a human perspective of how he and the UN endeavor to resolve them. I can personally say that it's one of the finest and most narrative books on how the UN's aim to make the world a better place.
Thank you.
Okay, can you read well? Professor, I will start with the first question, if I may. So as you heard by Oscar, Professor de Mistura published this book, Arm Twisting with the Devil. So we would like to ask you simply why you chose this title for this book. This book summarizes his life as a UN diplomat. So why did you choose diplomacy? And also, when was the first time you had to arm twist with the devil? Thank you.
Well, first of all, Alice, Oscar, and Professor, thank you for this opportunity. I always welcome, particularly at Sciences Po, the opportunity of sharing with students in particular my experience, because I had the privilege of doing it for now 51 years. I'm still alive, and I lost many of my colleagues in my life, and been in 28 wars. I didn't stop any war, and which I will explain to you why, but I did prevent 2 wars in my life. But in all the others, otherwise I would have resigned many years or joined Coca-Cola where you make more money or something like this. I felt we did make a difference in helping the people in the war. Because going back to the book, I didn't want to be a diplomat. I wanted to be, when I was a kid, a fireman. That's, like children who want to be a doctor or something. In fact, after that, I wanted to be a medical doctor. And then I was advised actually by my father that why do you want to be a medical doctor when I spoke at that time 5 languages and you don't use it? Why can't you be a doctor of countries? After all, they get sick very much. And just to end that comment, I want to say that it has helped me to keep going in spite of many frustrations. When you don't stop a war and people continue fighting, you start wondering why on earth you should be fighting yourself for stopping the war. And the way to compensate that frustration is, remember, I wanted to be a medical doctor. And a doctor never abandons his patient. He or she could be having Alzheimer or pancreatic cancer or something very serious that you can't treat. Would you then give up, abandon? No. What you do, you try to keep the patient alive. You try to provide them with painkillers. You try to give them hope. Because one day, somehow, you may find a treatment. In a war, one of the two leaders who are fighting may give up or have a coup d'etat, or they realize they can't continue fighting, or there is a pressure from outside. That's the moment when the negotiator can help in facilitating a face-saving solution. Meanwhile, what you do? Cry, do nothing, or arm twisting the devil. Now what? I said not breaking the arm of a devil, because you don't stop war, because often, because one side wants to win, the other one, look at the wars we are seeing these days, the other one doesn't want to lose it or win it, they still continue, especially these days when wars can be done cheaper through drones and other ways. But you can still tordere le bras, torcere il braccio, arm twisting, because you can complicate the life or the agenda of those who are using civilians in order to win a war. And you can, through many techniques, which I'm teaching here in part, which are to complicate the agenda of those who want to win a war by using civilians. In any case, do something to help those civilians, which could be any of us. So that's the reason of the arm twisting the devil. Who is the devil? The war, especially the war which affects civilians and those who believe that they can win a war by using the civilians. Now, what woke me up about it, like all of us, we have always a trauma, can be a book you read. By the way, this book was produced in Sweden and it's only in Swedish. And I blocked the translation because when I wrote it, I was a free man. I was my second time I tried to retire and then it didn't work out. Okay. And so when I was back in a UN mission, no, you can't, you don't refer anymore. You have a devoir d'attention. And so it was never translated, and we'll see when, but it does not contain everything, but some of it. But in Sweden, it was debated, but not many people read Swedish these days. So in a way, I was able to control the damage of it, because in a way, someone who is involved in a mission does not really make too much analysis in order to not, and in fact, you will have to forgive me, I will not refer today to any conflict ongoing, Gaza, Ukraine, or even Western Sahara, which is not a conflict, but because I want to protect those who are working on it. And I am now part of the teams who are trying to help in reducing those conflicts. So I will refer to old conflicts, but where the lessons are still very much applicable, especially if you read between the lines. Last point, to answer your point and your question, what triggered me getting involved in this type, because you can be in many ways in the UN. You can be at FAO for 20 years in Rome, writing very good reports, very useful, but perhaps not as exciting, and how dangerous it can be by being in the field. Because when I was 17, I was a volunteer in Cyprus, where I was given the opportunity to follow a UN delegation. And I was not happy at all. At 17, you know, you want to have holidays. And I was joining the university. I had a girlfriend. So I want to be in the summer on a holiday in Italy. But my father and my mother met this WFP gentleman who said, why can't you show him how the UN works? He may decide or not in that field. Like at that time, there was no UN visa and so on. So I paid my own ticket and so on and traveled and was in Cyprus, beautiful island, not very lucky because divided in two between Turkish and Greek the area, and tense with a UN line called the Green Line, which is separating the two communities. And I was just taking notes like a young person does when you follow a mission. And suddenly, just few meters from me, about 15 meters perhaps, on the Green Line, there were kids playing football with a ball. And I heard just a very non-strong noise. It was a sniper with a controlled for the noise gun and hit here a young boy. He was probably 8, 9 years. He was playing football and he died in front of my eyes. I had never seen in my life at that time anyone dying, or even my grandfather, and not killed by a person who is supposed to fight against other, not over and using children for that. So I got a feeling of outrage, very strong outrage. I want to believe healthy outrage. And I said, you know what, I will specialize myself in complicating those who try to use this type of systems in a war. So negotiating techniques in conflict areas, parachuting and airdropping aid, anything that could be technically useful for me to do that. And then volunteering over 51 years, virtually in every conflict, in order to get more and more specialized instead of staying at headquarters. That's the reason why Untwisting the Devil was the title of the book and of my course here, by the way. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you very much for that very vivid description, Professor de Mistura. So jumping a bit in your life, as the person responsible for handling a conflict on a UN mandate, could you walk us through the process before you sit down with the parties at the negotiation table? What preliminary planning do you undertake before addressing individuals involved in the conflict? And what is your opening statement at the negotiation table? And how do you proceed from there?
Well, first of all, let's go on the picture where I'm wearing a turban or something. That's it. That's the diplomat. Well, he doesn't look a diplomat and so on, but diplomats are not just people, cocktails and so on. What you do, you adjust to the local environment. This is in Afghanistan, Kandahar area. And what you do, you start studying the culture, preparing yourself to be acceptable, and understanding the sensitivities of the local population, of the counterparts, and the psychology of the other side. So that's the first thing to prepare. The second one is try to put yourself in their shoes, even if you don't like them, if you don't agree, a warlord, for instance, so that you start understanding the motivation. Why? Why is it that? Why that person? Is that ambition, personal ambition, trauma? Was his son killed by the other side? Is it an ethnical, religious background? Whatever it is. But the more you know, the better prepared you are, especially about the psychology, because we are not dealing with a jukebox on a machine or AI. You're dealing with human beings on the other side who feel very strongly about it, wrongly or rightly, and cruelly too. But if you don't identify why without sympathizing or empathizing, then you will not be able to prepare your points. And then, Oscar, I have to correct you. There is no opening statement because the real negotiator is a listener to start with. Of course, you can make a very short opening statement by saying, well, I'm glad to be here. My mission is the following, but I'm here to listen. Now, if the other side is a very good negotiator, they will also not speak. So you will have a silence. So what you do then, you use techniques such as rhetoric questions. Well, I understand that you are not showing your cards after all, but imagine, for instance, that I would suggest the following outcome. What would be your response? Well, you know, I want to hear your position on it, but imagine. And by the way, if you don't want to discuss that, let's discuss about talks. In other words, do we meet every Friday or Thursday? Do we have a press conference before and after? And by having that, you pick up an entry point. And the entry point becomes the entry point for starting discussing about a negotiation. So there is psychology, homework, put yourself in their place, and then many other techniques. One technique is clearly observe. And we went through that, you remember. And learn to observe the other side. What is the body language? Is the person in front of you an alpha, the real leader, or the person in the back who is actually to whom they are turning? Is he or she the one you should be at a certain point, address your eyes and try to make a proposal? And when?
Thank you very much. And if you go a bit further to the agreement and conclusion of a peace negotiation, what are the steps and elements you think are crucial to reaching a viable and lasting peace agreement? I mean, you have an excellent example in your book. You call it the magical moment when the US, Russia, and the United Nations reached an agreement on a peace plan for Syria on September 9th, 2016. And then you noted that the magical moment disappeared. So what happened?
Let's go perhaps on the picture with Lavrov and Kerry. That's it. Kerry, Secretary of State of US, and Sergei Lavrov, who is still foreign minister many years in the Russian Federation. There are moments where there is a magic taking place, and the security is catching it and trying to mobilize it. And there was a moment when that took place, 2017, in the Syrian war. And some time ago, I did meet Sergei Lavrov again, and about a year ago, I had an occasion of having a conversation with John Kerry, who is now involved in the environment, and both confirmed to me that that was a genuine missed opportunity. First of all, background. The background is psychology again. There was a concern by the US that Russia had got involved militarily in Syria. There was a concern by Russia to not get stuck in Syria too much with an American involvement, which would have then made it even more difficult for them to stay longer. There is an American involvement, but it's very limited. They were afraid of bigger involvement and therefore end up being stuck. Then there was chemistry. Lavrov and Kerry, I saw it, liked each other, or at least did not dislike each other, but I would rather say humanly liked each other. They were exchanging jokes, there was complicity, human complicity. Each one has his own agenda, each one has got his own boss, but that makes a difference. When did they develop that? Because for weeks they were part of the negotiation on Iran nuclear issues. And during that period, you have a tea, coffee, you sit, you have a sandwich, you talk about your family. That is what makes also life more natural in the relation of human beings. That was a factor. And then there were agendas. John Kerry, after the Iranian deal, felt free to ask and convince President Obama to do what he had very much avoided to get involved in the Syrian conflict. They were getting closer to the end of their mandate. And he felt generally that it would have been a black spot to not get US engagement in trying to make a difference in what at that time was the biggest humanitarian crisis and the most regional conflict. 11 countries were involved in it and do nothing. So that was his genuine motivation. trying to make a difference. For Lavrov, it was, I think, two things. Well, I can't guess it because I have a feeling. One was for Russia not to get stuck in Syria. B, they believed that with John Kerry, with which there was a chemistry, it would have been the best time and the best counterpart to have a negotiation about how to avoid that the conflict will then get Russia stuck into a very complicated conflict. And probably, I think President Putin and Lavrov didn't feel comfortable about the idea that Hillary Clinton could have been the president after Obama, because she had already publicly said, if I become, I will get even more militarily involved than Obama had. So you have a cocktail here of different ingredients can lead to a compromise. And the discussions led to a compromise. Magic moment. For whatever reasons, the compromise, which we were part of, was, in my opinion, a big game changer if applied. Because on the Russian side, the commitment was to actually stop all aerial bombing by Syria and by the Russians, which were mostly the cause of much of the distraction. There were very few big battles in Syria. There have been, but there was a lot of aerial bombing, barrel bombs, helicopters, and so on. On the American side, the commitment was to also stop the aerial presence, but that was not relevant, but to actually focus on al-Nusra, which was one of the components fighting Assad, true, probably the most motivated one, but al-Nusra was, according to themselves, a franchising of Al-Qaeda, which had been identified with the Twin Towers bombing in New York, so it made sense. You take care of al-Nusra, you take care of telling Assad no flying. Both of them sides would have been weakened because without aerial bombing, Assad would have found it more difficult to actually win the war. And therefore, without al-Nusra, the opposition, which was divided, and they were very motivated and well-financed, would have been weaker. When you get weaker, the tendency is to try to find a compromise. That's when some wars have ended, by the two sides getting too tired or not getting their sponsors strong enough in supporting them. And therefore, that's the space for the lawyer, the doctor, to come up with a face-saving formula in order to reduce that to a very different conflict. Great! I was so excited. Everybody at midnight. And finally, we announced it. And why me? Because if I announce it, I'm neutral. If Russia or US announce it, it's, they give an angle regarding their own, we got that and so on. So they both felt it should be the UN. And by doing so, you commit both sides. And then, well, something wrong happened. There was an hesitation by the Pentagon about the fact that they wanted 7 days of no fighting, ceasefire, to get the deal working. And 7 days is a lot of time when you have made a deal for spoilers to get involved. Whereas the original idea was 72 hours. So what happened then? Well, there was a mistake done by the US military. They acknowledged it was a mistake, but it killed 102, 105 Syrian military in a base in the desert, which the Russians and the government didn't believe it was a mistake because they said, how can you not see them? They said it was a mistake, and apparently it was probably a mistake, but a very bad one, right? Very bad. The reaction to that was, it was a bombing of a convoy of the UN bringing aid into the opposition areas. And the magic disappeared. Trust disappeared. Conclusion, I always regretted that, and so does, in my opinion, both Lavrov and Kerry. And the message is, in life, in love actually, in friendship, in business, in geopolitics, timing. You may meet the boyfriend of your life or the wife of your, or whatever, in a train, and you see her passing by and you don't jump on the train, you lost it. You didn't pick up the opportunity of making the best of a certain magic moment. Same is in geopolitics. Once we miss that, the credibility of both sides disappeared and trust. And meanwhile, by that time, Obama and Kerry were on the way out. So whatever they would say, no one would believe they would be able to deliver. And at the same time, the war then took place on Aleppo, the attack on Aleppo, and then President Trump came, who was not interested, at least in the beginning, on the Syrian issue. So there was more time, more vacuum, and the whole thing disappeared. Many, many people would have been saved if that had taken place. So that was the magic moment. So Oscar, never miss it, both privately or publicly. Okay, good.
Thank you, Professor. So you devoted your life to the UN. You had many, many UN experiences, but I want to ask you a question about Italy. Professor de Mistura was under the government of Mario Monti between 2011 and 2013, under Secretary of State for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. So I wanted to ask you, related to this, what was the main differences between your previous UN experiences and these Italian experiences under the Italian government? And if there were, what were the main challenges you had to take into account and, yes, solve?
Well, it's a good question, which I've been asking myself too. First of all, I became Deputy Foreign Minister and Under Secretary of State because it was a technical government. I didn't want to get involved in politics. And B, because the UN was asked to borrow me. So I was loaned by the UN. So I felt, and Italy was going through a very difficult moment. In fact, I spoke even with Carl Bildt, who told me, no, Sweden has no problems. You are both nationality. Italy has a problem. It was a question of credibility financially and so on. So it was a difficult moment. And I was excited in trying to contribute to one of the two modern father countries I have. At the same time, I was worried because when you work for the UN may many frustrations and less when you're in emergency war zones because there is no time for bureaucracy, or not much anyway. But still, with bilateral diplomacy, I was worried that I may be asked to support sale of weapons, for instance, which would be completely contrary of what I've been doing all my life, or cars, or winning a competition with a neighboring country, France or Germany. No, it was the type of things that I didn't feel that my DNA was in that direction, although it is important for bilateral diplomacy. But so I asked to be involved in international human rights issues and in terms of UN issues, where I was an expert, comparatively speaking. And that helped me in not having that type of moral dilemma. But it also is a moment of strength. Let me share with you something that is a episode where I could see the advantage of being a deputy minister of a country. When you're in the UN, you're a little bit more careful. You don't have the power of blocking things or proposing aggressively things. You have to find a way to have every country more or less, although you make and take risk politically, and you should, and make proposals too when you are negotiating. Fly with me to Tokyo. Let's go to Tokyo. And Tokyo in 2011, the president of Afghanistan, Karzai at the time, had asked for a special conference, donor conference, money, to have 70 $17 billion US dollars contribution to the budget of Afghanistan. In change, everything is about something else, in order to allow countries who were involved in Afghanistan to start be allowed to withdraw, because they were getting tired. But you have to pay a price. In other words, give the money so that we can train our army and the country and so on. 17 billion. So every country who was involved in Afghanistan, Italy, Sweden, Belgium, there were many, 50, and were there, plus the US, of course, with Hillary Clinton herself. And the conference was about that. Now, you should know that there is, and I knew, of course, that conferences, G7, G8, G20, have a choreography. And that choreography is that you have Sherpas, as they're called Sherpas, people assigned by every country to contribute to prepare the final declaration. Final declaration is prepared a long time before with a lot of negotiation, and normally a little bit complicated because everyone wants his own sentence in it, a little bit like a Security Council resolution. But it works. And finally, you have the paper. Then you have the conference. The conference is when ministers come, and they are supposed to basically meet each other bilaterally and so on, then make a speech, normally for internal consumption. You know, the Brits about we are doing, the Italians, well, everyone. But then finally it's more about internal consumption. And then the president says, we have a document which had been worked on. Is it approved? Good, approved. Then there is a photo. Everybody goes to the photo. There is a number. You stand there and everybody moves in order to attract that moment a photo, and then a dinner or luncheon. And there is a final declaration. So I was sent as undersecretary. I was lucky enough to have as a minister of foreign affairs at that time, a very, very motivated and charismatic lady called Emma Bonino. And so I felt my back being covered. But what I did discover was that, in fact, in the resolution prepared by the Sherpas, there was 17 billion to the Afghan authorities, and then on the Afghan side, a commitment to try to implement human rights issues, including for women, including 17 billion, and they only say including, when we all know that one of the reasons of the involvement in Afghanistan was Al-Qaeda, yes, Daesh or whatever, Bin Laden, 9/11, but also the burqa and the women being stoned publicly and so on. So when the moment comes by the chair of the conference to say, well, we have a document, it's already approved, it needs to be unanimous, I knew, experience from the UN. So suddenly, before he does that, he says Italy. That's where the strength of the bilateral thing. Yes, and he knew me. So Mr. de Mistura, what is the problem? Well, there is a problem because the people who are contributing to the 17 billion are normal people who would like to see their money well utilized. Many of them are retired people, and they are having a lot of sacrifices at the moment. It was not a good moment in the economy in Europe in general. So having just one mention en passant, including women, when actually Bin Laden is dead, is over. And the only reason and argument to continue spending a lot of money on Afghanistan is now also feeling that the future, sadly, all this, as you know, is not the case. We'll talk about it if you want, of having women human rights well recognized. It was not the Taliban, it was the government. So Karzai says, come on, Mr. de Mistura, you know our culture and traditions. He said, I know, but you should know also the culture of those who are paying the money, that at least attention, because these Afghan women are courageous, strong ladies who want to be part, and they are 51% of the population. And there was a delegation of Afghan women who were actually saying, yes, 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 but there was not. So the meeting and the approval is not taking place. It must be unanimous. I knew it. One can spoil, and I was a spoiler. And the agenda was, after this, there is a photo, and the photo needs to be done when there is light. In fact, I have the photo it took place, but it was not very clear. And then there is a dinner, and you can't wait too long. And then they take the planes and leave. So I said, well, I'm sorry, I cannot approve. And when you say that one is not approved, you can't say unanimous. You have to say most of them, but you can't say unanimous, which is a failure for the conference. So I had a leverage. And to make the leverage particularly effective, I went to the bathroom so that no one could disturb me, and blocked my phone, because I knew that they were going to call the prime minister in Italy and tell him, you have a very strange guy there who is actually blocking the whole conference. We are supposed to have the sushi all together now and have a photo and all that, and this is being spoiled. But I didn't get a call, and probably Emma Bonino would have covered me, but just in case. And then waited 45 minutes with my team, knowing where I was, but no one else. And then finally they came out, and the Japanese and the Afghans told me, Mr. de Mistura, what do you want? Well, I would like the mention of women 8 times, and I have it here, not including spatially, the word spatially. And secondly, the 17 billion should not be just bakshish like this, money. Should be linked by installments to projects related to human rights for women controlled by UNDP or the UN agencies. But this is too much. Okay, you want me to go back to the bathroom? Finally, it ended up very late that evening, but it was approved, as we said. What do I mean? Well, that bilateral diplomacy, if it was UN saying, we have a problem, yes, or tell me why, and we will address it. But one country, bilateral, could make the difference. So that's my experience on that.
Thank you. It was very interesting. If I ask one last question, then we will give the floor to you to ask as many questions as you want. So to conclude briefly, I wanted to ask you, what are your expectations on the future of the UN peace efforts in the world? If you have expectations, and if you envision a form of peace through the UN in the world.
Human nature is terrible, and because there has always been wars, and there always will be a tendency for wars. We're going through a very difficult period, I have to admit it. And because never have I seen so many very strong conflicts taking place, and with a feeling of might is right as a tendency. But and the UN is blocked by at the Security Council, but not on the humanitarian side, not on the actions that we can do on the field, but on the Security Council. But now, think about it. If you or I were born in 1900, the year, born on 2nd January 1900, and you would then have, through your life, seen First World War, 20 million people killed, 50 million dying of their COVID, a much bigger COVID than ours, called the Española, the Spanish flu. Then you would have had 29 the economic crisis by far more devastating than the one we have seen recently. And then you would see, due to the mishandling of the peace of the First World War, the opportunity by humiliating one country in particular, Germany at that time, by too tough punishment for the First World War, the opportunity for a horrible caporal, totally unprepared and clearly mentally deranged, called Hitler, to take over the country and reaching the point of Second World War with another 25 million people dead and 2 atomic bombs. And then you are then believing that you're having a paradise. No, you have the Vietnam War, the Cold War, the Korea War, and then all sorts of other conflicts, including the ones we have seen. And you are just 75. And yet the world has overcome it. We got progress in many fields. In other words, the bottom line is it looks bad, and it is bad. But don't give up. I don't give up, so you should not either. Give up on the fact that the human nature and humanity is able, in spite of all this, to still start again and make a difference. Now, don't forget, I want to be a doctor, so I am by definition optimistic. Otherwise, you would not give up. You would give up on only, and you would treat only the patients who have a chance to give you glory by treating them and not those who are in difficulty. And the alternative, the UN is in trouble because it is a picture of 1945, not realistic. There are countries like India, Turkey, Brazil, South Africa, who are much qualified to be in it. But those who have the veto power will never give it up because they got a photo Polaroid of the 1945 and they like to keep it there. But so there are needs of changes on the UN Security Council in particular. We'll see where they take place. Otherwise, the General Assembly can be a replacement to a certain degree. But the alternative is the jungle. And the jungle is much worse than what we're having now. So bottom line, if I were you, I would still believe that you can be part, like I've been trying to do and still continue. I'm 77 now. So I could have retired some few years ago to try to contribute to make a difference. The alternative is the jungle.
Thank you so much. Now, if you don't want to add anything else to this, we can leave the floor to questions. If you guys have, we have 2 microphones here, so we can pass it around. I can pass it around. And so just raise your hands and ask all your questions that you have. But maybe we can start with the people in the room. Yes, thank you.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you, sir. My name is Dick Oko. I'm a Kenyan, and so my question will majorly reflect on that part of the world. And so your role involves a lot of top-down peacemaking process. And so how does, in that international bodies and these actors come into regions to work with the local actors in trying to bridge, to bring about peace between warring parties? And so how is the involvement of local actors, how does that influence the process, the negotiation process? And again, this is relying on also my country, in that there's been this issue. Of course, you've said you're not going to comment on ongoing conflicts, so I'll try to move it away from directly commenting on the conflict. But in Haiti, there's been conversation with the US government of funding a Kenyan police force to go into Haiti to bring about peace and deal with the gangs. And so my question still relates to the local actors. How does this working with the local actors, how does this influence your work as someone who works within peace negotiations? And when such issues such as other powers work with countries to, bring about peace, it's all the goal that is there. How does it affect your work as someone who works with an organization that tries to be staying in the middle and neither favoring one side? How does that affect your work as a negotiator?
Well, it does affect, of course, but I would like probably the real question in your question is how do we relate morally when big players seem to be contradicting each other regarding what is the role of the UN into a region in Somalia or in Sudan. And there are countries who are supporting one side and the other, for instance, Sudan today. My answer has been always, and I try to do it, is that the barometer, the compass, is not the countries or their governments, it's the people. And the people means, is this initiative making a difference for the people of that region? Yes, then it is worth pushing. If it is instead simply because one side wants to win over the other in order to stop up on that, then frankly, we will try to keep going, but we will focus again on the people. That has helped me to avoid to be pulled on the right or the left side. And in a way has helped my conscience to feel that I was trying on one line, the people. That's been my own answer on that. Now, if a contingent of Kenyan policemen will make a difference for those people who are in Haiti torn by gangs or bandits, and make the possibility for them not to just, as I see now in the hospitals, not being able to go or go to the buying the food, then it will be a contribution of which Kenya can be proud of. But it will only be if it does make a difference for the people.
Hello, thank you very much for this great intervention you did. But since you know the UN so well, you have demonstrated to us a firm conviction for world peace, and I want to ask your opinion on the importance of revolving doors. In French, we say pantouflage in the UN. You actually made a joke about your possibility to work at Coca-Cola at the beginning of the conference for more money. But in French high administration, since basically the 1980s, has become a place where revolving doors have become typical and have resulted in damaging of French welfare state and French people's connection to the state and trust in it. You know, education has become more egalitarian, health, etc., has become worse since the 1980s. And so I wanted to ask you if for you, the UN is still a place of trust and commitment than more of a place of revolving doors and corruption. I don't know, like to some extent.
Let's distinguish revolving doors and corruption. Tell me, give me an example of revolving. Vous êtes en train de penser à quelque chose en particulier, j'imagine.
I don't know the UN well enough.
But give me an example of revolving door so I can visualize it.
Oh, well, in France, for example, the Minister of Transport said, did advertisement for a French company that does hydrogen cars. And normally they're supposed to wait 3 years after they're not a minister to join a private company, but he joined it directly. So he's breaking the law and he's going there, or people working at the transparency in the state at Bercy, and then going to like private cabinets because they know how taxes work in order to help companies. So I mean, that's a mini example of private revolving doors.
Okay, I got it. I don't see how it does impact on the type of work I'm doing at the UN, because let me see. Do I have any examples of UN officials retiring and then getting involved and rich with private companies? Do you have any? I don't know them.
No, that's why I'm asking you, because in France it's really commonplace.
Yeah. There are two reasons, perhaps. We are useless seen from their point of view because on a path, we are not able to be business-oriented in the way that you sell, or because we have been affected by the virus of the type of work we are doing. I don't know. But I don't know people who used to work with in the UN who then became big businessmen or so that type of revolving door, I don't see it in the UN at least. What you can be is that you have a minister from a country who have been involved in politics or business and then becomes nominated by the country as a candidate for a senior UN position. That I've seen it, and it's not. But then we all watching whether he or she will be careful in not being touched by that type of background. In other words, forget it.
Okay. Yeah, revolving doors are public from private, so
yes,
that wouldn't.
No, and I don't. No, because I would know that because at least they would invite me to the Coca-Cola headquarters or something.
And my second question is, so it's a bit different, but when he was told that the West was a waning power, Mike Pompeo said that the West is winning. So do you think that this is the case? And if it isn't, what does it mean for world peace for you?
Well, you see, no one is winning at this moment. And no one is likely to win anything that we are watching under the sky, because what is happening is people are being penalized on all sides. So the idea that whether the West or the East or the South or the North will be winning is out of context these days. It used to be perhaps during the Cold War. But look at the moment, how many other groups of countries. We are in a multipolar environment. It used to be bilateral, bipolar. And then for a short period after the end of the Cold War was unipolar, only US. But look at today. How many important medium regional countries are today capable of saying no, either to the US or even to Russia or to China. So it's not a good idea to simply believe that one will prevail on the other at this stage. It's not realistic. Hey.
Hey. I was curious. I'm Swedish, so I was curious, how has your national heritage as Italian Swedish colored your outlook in the work that you do?
It has. Of course, the biggest problem is if you ask me whether I should choose between Swedish and Italian, because it is like choosing between your father and your mother, and both of them had a major impact on me. So the only moment when I find myself in great difficulties when Italy and Sweden play football with each other. And that's when I try not to watch it, so it's not an issue. But what I've been told, is always difficult to do self-analysis, of course, and that the Swedish side had a major impact on me on one element in particular. The fact that people like Dag Hammarskjöld, like Folke Bernadotte, like Raoul Wallenberg, all worked for peace operations or similar, and all died while doing that and because of that. And that gave me a strong feeling about whether it is worth risking your life, which they did, and they ended up with it, for a good cause. And that's a good example. Dag Hammarskjöld was the reason why I joined the UN, and so was Folke Bernadotte. And Raoul Wallenberg is an ideal for me, which I've been making the first speech of the day of commemoration of Raoul Wallenberg, who was forgotten for a while. The Italian side, well, I've been told that I have a lot of creativity in my work, in other words, coming up with ideas out of the box and negotiating techniques which are different than average. And I think that comes probably from the Italian the component of creativity. So I've been lucky on that. Does it help me in character? Well, I've been told also that in difficult moments, I keep very cold and not emotional, and that's probably the Swedish side. At the same time, there is a need of feeling strong human touch and personality and human empathy, which comes from the Mediterranean side. So in that sense, it's been helpful. But that's what others say. And my mother used to say she loves her son, so it's obviously she was very, very kind with me by saying that.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have other questions? Okay, maybe we can take one last one and then we take the one on the Zoom because there were 3. Go, no, but you can ask. We have to leave at 7, so we have some time.
First of all, thank you very much for being here. And I had a question because you were.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you hear me better? Yeah. Because throughout your speech, we're talking about different characteristics and different, let's say, abilities that you had that help you in your work. You were talking about languages, of course. And then at one point you said, oh, there was something in my DNA that helped me do the work that I do. And I was wondering what is that like, what does someone have to have innate in them, in their DNA, to be able to do this work? What can we learn from outside? Of course, the languages, the technique, the body language, these techniques, but what comes from us?
Sure.
A second. And then I was wondering what had been, you were talking, of course, about your experience in Cyprus and how that's transformed your life, basically.
Yeah.
And I was also wondering what was the toughest time throughout your career? And can you work in this field if you don't consider yourself specifically to be an optimistic?
So let's start with the last one, because yes, it's very difficult to work in this field if you are not profoundly an optimist about human nature. But the strength or the vitamin for that has been, well, a component of religion, but we don't necessarily have to have it if you, but in my case, helped me, was the parabola dei talenti, the talent parabola, and in which you are given some qualities or assets in your background through your family, nation, religion, history, and you have to put them at the disposal of the community. That is one element that has helped in feeling the motivation for it. The second one is the very victims we are trying to help. Particularly, I will never forget in Syria, for instance, and I have many anecdotes on that. When in Lebanon, I went to see some refugees, Syrian refugees. Madame is from Lebanon, so she knows. And there was a mother with 8 children, The husband was dead in Syria, having fought or being a part of the opposition. And she was living on a tent with 8 children. And when I went there at that moment, I was visiting it and we were having a ceasefire, thanks to the Lavrov-Kerry agreement that for a few days worked. And she told me, you know, I'm ready. I'm going to take the tent, bring it with my 8 children, and move back to the place where the house which was destroyed. And I said to myself, if that lady has that type of energy in believing in the future of her own life and her own 8 children, being a widow and having only a tent in a country which is still at war, how can I be doubting about the fact that we should try?
So first, actually, the past 30 years have taught us that while cessation of hostilities may be best achieved within the narrow cycle of leaders with effective control of fighting parties, lasting peace is rarely achieved without including broader cycle of actors. So, as a questions, a series of post-conflict situations showed the terrible consequences of not including actors beyond conflict leaders, those within society who have a power of nuisance and destabilization. So, I think...
Is that the end of the question?
End of question. How do you resolve this apparent dilemma between the leaders and the other stakeholders? It's pretty similar to your questions, I think.
You solve it by including it.
I'm sorry to intervene. I'm happy to read my own questions aloud. And there was also a reference to UNSCR 1325.
I don't understand. What did you...
We do not understand clearly what you expressed. So could you repeat, please?
Yes, with pleasure. Good evening, and thank you for giving me the floor, Camille Massé. My question actually was, I think, connected to the one that was asked by the first in-person participant, our colleague from Kenya. I would try to bring it a little bit further. I'm taking the example of the conflict in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where I had the pleasure to live for a few years and serve. I think we've seen that to stop hostilities, it is often most expedient to negotiate within fairly narrow circles of leaders who do have effective control over the forces in presence. Now, for lasting peace, and again, Bosnia is a very good example, but there are many others. For lasting peace, some kind of dialogue, more inclusive, is often necessary. And some of the solutions negotiated in narrow circles are good at stopping hostilities, but not good as building lasting peace. The Dayton agreements are a bit of a deadlock for Bosnia. Again, there are many other examples. I just think this one is particularly illustrative. So there is a bit of a dilemma. The need to cease hostilities and for that engage narrow circles, the need to think of lasting peace and building societies, and for this include more actors. So how do you, Mr. de Mistura, see the way forward in front of this dilemma? And having inclusion in mind, I would also ask you how you see in your work the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security, and in particular the inclusion of women not just as subjects of negotiations but actors of negotiations. Thank you very much in advance.
Now I got it better, and it's a very valid, important question, frankly. Thank you for raising that point. Well, I can speak for myself and using an example. You're right, having just the leaders and not having civil society, in particular women, into a peace negotiation means that the sustainability of the deal will not be guaranteed at all. And B, all elements leading to peace will not be taken into account. So what I did on Syria, for instance, was that when I asked the two delegations to come, the opposition and the government, and there was a picture on that with the UN emblem in the back, but I don't know whether you have it. I asked for women and civil society to be present. And finally, they came only with 3 out of 21. All the others were politicians, all of them, or top guys in their own delegation. And the women were 3, and they were not even given the floor. And they were probably counting on what we call in negotiating technique constructive embarrassment, the other side. In other words, I was organizing the conference. I had the whole ambassadors in front, big UN press emblem, and invited the 2 delegations. How can I then spoil the party? And I was very angry. And I knew that without women and civil society women would have not been the picture we needed. So I decided to ask my colleagues to leave the seats behind me on my sides and actually have Afghan women, the Syrian women of the civil society sitting with me. So they're not part of the delegation there, but they have an influence on the UN mediator. So more influence than actually the 2 sides. We call that WAB, Women's Advisory Board. The 2 sides were angry with me, saying, these are not our women, this is not our civil society. Wait a moment, what you mean our? They represent civil society, they represent the ground. They are able to talk to each other, even if they disagree. They are part of now my delegation. And it worked because they could not ignore them anymore. And they were, in fact, much more influential than these 2 groups who are just arguing and fighting with each other. So the bottom line is, it's not easy because sometimes the delegation says, this is my delegation, basta. But that's where the mediator should get involved, like it was my case, and my colleague in Yemen did the same now, and in Libya, to insist on saying, fine, but since I'm the one facilitating meeting, if I don't see that part of the society in it, this process will not be sustainable. We know it, and we will not be well informed about the realities.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, shared. We have 5 minutes left because at 7 there's another conference study. Do you want to ask another question, or otherwise we can make a final remark as you prefer?
Please make the final remark.
No, you have to make it. I will thank
No,
you.
no, I don't know.
No, but first of all, thank you guys for coming today. I hope you found it interesting to hear from Professor de Mistura. I personally found it very interesting and very touching as well at some point. And yes, so thank you for coming. Thank you, Professor, for today, for everything you shared with us, for your time. And thank you, Oscar, for organizing this. Thank you so much for everything in the Nordic Association, and thank you from La Strada as well. And Professor, if you want to say one last thing, otherwise we can close. Oscar, do you want to say anything?
Just thank you a lot, Professor de Mistura, for your extremely vivid, clarification also on the UN. That's, being a UN diplomat and just being in the field is not just about the suit, and it's also being with the people, and in their core assets. So thank you a lot for clarifying that part of being a diplomat, and also all your techniques and psychology and all those elements are critical to diplomacy. Thank you a lot for these very, very interesting aspects of diplomacy.
No, and only with thank you, and all 3 of you, and for helping in making this opportunity. I am in a mission at the moment on
an area of conflict or potential conflict. But also I'm on a mission of trying to share what I've been learning on my skin, over my skin, literally, by 51 years of experience. And when you are been fishing all your life, and you then decide when you are still not gaga yet to go on skiing, you are making a crime, because it would be good to help younger people. You are me, because I was you, and I was you not, in my opinion, many years ago. I still remember how it was, and being able to be given some tools or some way to believe in what you're doing, but also how to make it happen and not to be frustrated, is, in Italian, you say una marcia in più. It's an opportunity of starting with your car a little bit faster. And that, to me, is a mission. And I would feel very proud, as I do with many of my students, who have been showing to me that they have been using it in order to go faster into believing in this work. Now, the motto, which is still one I apply, because there are moments, ups and downs, and you will see it, is, did you try? Did you fail? Try harder, fail better, but don't give up. And that's what something I've been trying to do all the time. Thank you.
Thank you.